I'd just be interested in hearing your thoughts about the election we just went through, and tell us, are there any Republicans, important Republicans, who are listening to what you have to say?
Yeah. Oh, dear. 48% of America went on Prozac Tuesday evening. It's such a difficult scenario, because if you have any capacity for idealism, and of course we all do, then the biggest ideal you can think of, which might be some sort of integral, inclusive, becomes the yardstick that you want to judge the real world against. And of course, if you do that, you really are going to be on Prozac for most of your life. It's way too much to do. You actually have to look at the real world. And the real world, 98% of the population is at first tier. So realistically, it means that we're going to have first-tier politics for a while. Now, I think we're actually, in the last 5 years, there's been a bit of a shift, and I'll talk a little bit about it in terms of some of the people that we're working with and that are interested in this. But realistically, you have to say that we're involved in a first-tier political arena. And that's okay. That's where the world is. But remember, the definition of every first-tier meme or level is that it thinks its value structure is the only correct one. And everybody else is wrong. So James Carville, the great Clinton strategist, who is a genius in his own way, wrote a book called We're Right, They're Wrong. That was his summary of his political orientation. Karl Rove could write the same book. We're right, they're wrong, and going to burn in hell. That's what happens with first tier. So I'm in the awkward position of having, basically it's the lesser of two evils, if you were. And in this case, you have to go with the leading edge, which is orange to green, which means a liberal party. Now, what we're hoping, of course, is that at some point we're going to start to get a more integral understanding among politicians. And frankly, a lot of politicians are very much aware of this stuff. Karl Rove has received a 2-hour presentation on all quadrant, all level, all line. And believe me, he understands it. Now, you can say that's good or bad, but he understands it because he's a turquoise thinker with a blue, wicked, evil little heart. Jeb Bush, in Florida, the Florida, they have I don't know if it's a committee or a office on Florida values, and they use a brief history of everything. So both Democrats and Republicans are aware of this. Some of you know I've told the story before, but Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Tony Blair have all read this stuff, my books in particular. Bill Clinton's read 6 or 7 of my books. And it started by reading The Marriage of Sense and Soul and wrote a 4-page handwritten letter on it, and he gave the book to Al Gore and asked Al to read it. Al read it and told the New Yorker magazine it was his favorite new book. Tony Blair has done this. So there's a whole group of politicians that are aware of this. Now, because any good politician, including Karl Rove, Jeb Bush, George doesn't read, but his brother does. Bill, Al, and so on. They're yellow or turquoise thinkers. That's how you get to be where they are. Now, their center of gravity might be blue or orange or green, or on occasion, yellow. But they can read this and they get it. And then they use it to advance wherever they happen to be. And again, that's okay. It's the real world, and that's what happens. But the difficulty right now for me is 2 things. What this election showed, I think, more than anything else, first of all, is it used to be that the Democrats were the party that could get out the vote. And they just have a long history of this, going all the way back to the big city political machines where they could guarantee getting out the labor vote and so on. And it was never thought that the Republicans could actually get out their vote. Karl Rove figured out a way to get out the church vote. And it wasn't that this country regressed to blue. It's that all of a sudden they found a way to register blue meme voters. And we got a very accurate reading of just how many people are at that stage of development. Again, it's not a judgment. We can't get into that. People grow through these stages, and it is every American's right to be at whatever stage of development they're at. But the problem is, we're really forced now, we really do have this 2-nation thing going on. And And the scary part isn't even in this country, although that's scary enough. It's that Clinton, Gore, and most of our political leaders over the past several decades had forged an orange to green, world-centric political consensus with the other developed Western democracies. And it was a world-centric mutual give and take. Now, clearly, we're the 800-pound gorilla. We're the only superpower with the capacity to wreak havoc. But we were still in a dialogical allegiance with our European friends. When Bush got into power and took us back down into blue, that's from world-centric into ethnocentric. Now, so it's a unilateral, we're going to do it, fuck you, we don't need Europe, we don't need any of you, we're going into Iraq, like it or not. That so alarmed Europe, understandably, that there's been a philosophical rupture between us and our long-standing orange to green allies. And 8 years of that is going to do such damage to that very fragile fabric of world-centric consensus. And under those circumstances, I think that's very, very, very spooky. So it's pretty hard to get happy after that. On the other hand, what these things often do is galvanize, the political opposition in that sense. And the Democrats are, in disarray. Liberalism is in disarray for at least one major reason. It used to have an orange philosophy, and half of it is now green. And green, particularly in its mean green forms, hates the Western world, hates the modern Enlightenment, hates America. Why would you want a president, why would you elect a president who hated the West? Why would you want that as your leader? So the liberal leading edge, I hold almost entirely responsible for this disaster. Because until they can present a coherent, meaningful, non-hatred of the West political philosophy, they have zero chance of getting into power. And that's going to crucify the 51 or 52% that we would have if they got their act together. So what's happening right now is that the liberals are really spooked. But the good news is, we're working with Al Gore. We have a partnership that we're working on with his. He purchased Indie TV, which is this cable satellite organization with 20 million viewers, and we're helping develop programming with that. Bill Clinton wants to come and play. We want to have a bipartisan discussion, on the one hand, of just these topics, but on the other hand, we want to really come up with a think tank on how do you engineer a healthy green, number one, but especially then an integral overview of how to contain that. And I think there are politicians now that exactly want to do that, and I think they realize that unless they do that, that fundamental mythic membership blue meme is going to carry the day, along with orange Republicans, Wall Street Republicans. It's not looking pleasant. So on the one hand, the silver lining is that I think we really are going to have this kind of discussion, and we've already started it with a lot of these folks. So, stay tuned.